ahead on Straight Talk.
This is a huge moment for Portland.
The 2024 election marked a big shift for the city of Portland, ushering in a brand new form of government and a new leader at the helm.
We have 12 wonderful leaders. I'll be that 13th, and the 13 of us are going to work to care for all Portlanders.
Now, 100 days into office, we sit down with Portland's new mayor, Keith Wilson.
Voters aren't interested in politicians pointing fingers. They just want us to get things done.
How he's tackling Portland's biggest issues, including addiction and the homeless crisis.
Together, we can end unsheltered homelessness in a low-cost, flexible, and immediate fashion. That's love.
To closing the city's $100 million budget gap.
When we're talking reductions, we're talking about people, not just a budget. And so we have to be very cautious and we have to be very careful.
That and more right now on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Stephanie Domerat. Now, the Rose City has undergone a lot in the last several years, including taking a major economic hit during the pandemic, a potentially pending urban doom loop, and a new form of government just this year. Today, we sit down with its new leader, Mayor Keith Wilson, now 100 days into office. Wilson was sworn into office near the end of December of last year and stepped into his role at the start of this year. Before jumping into local politics, Wilson was the CEO of Titan Freight Systems, which he helped transform into Oregon's first freight carrier to use electric trucks. He's also passionate about addressing homelessness. In 2022, Wilson founded his own nonprofit called Shelter Portland, which advocates for solutions to homelessness and helps provide funding for some shelter programs. Mayor Wilson, thanks so much for coming in. It's great to have you today.
Pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity, Stephanie.
Yes. Well, it feels like time has flown by already, but 100 days in, how has it been being the mayor of the city where you grew up?
It's an incredible honor. It's incredible highs one day, incredible lows the next, but it is an opportunity to show up and just work as hard as I can and just trying to help turn our city around. But it's been a wonderful honor.
Yeah. What prompted you, I guess, to want to run for mayor and step into this role?
You know, I love the city. I've traveled a lot. I've left and I've come back, and it was probably 6-7 years ago. I was driving down the streets and I didn't recognize our city anymore. With people suffering on the side of the street, the care and concern, we had started normalizing that in our community. So I just started learning about what I can do to help, and I started volunteering. And today I find myself as the mayor. It seemed to be the most important role to play to really provide my all to help turn the city around.
One of your biggest campaign platforms was ending homelessness. You said you could end unsheltered homelessness in 12 months. You're a quarter of a way there, now 3 months in. So how is your plan going, and has it been more difficult than you anticipated?
No, actually, I'm really surprised. The outpouring of support has been overwhelming. We're in the capacity building stage right now. We've already opened shelters. We've got many more in the pipeline to add. We've built an emergency management team at the city to start really resourcing, building relationships. We've had listening sessions with homeless service providers. We have a listening session with faith-based communities coming. The business community has stepped up and offered 40 facilities. We've actually got one that we're prepping that is getting ready to come online. I'm heartened and I'm clear with everybody. It's a 1-year goal, because we're not here to talk about 3 years or 5 years. When you have thousands of people suffering, you must act. In fact, I set up a core value in my emergency meeting, and the core value, one of them is action. It's not waiting and overthinking it. It's acting with the resources we have right now to do the most good we can immediately. So I'm pleasantly surprised.
Okay, well, in January you proposed your big plan, right, that you wanted to roll out. It would cost $28 million. Right now the city and the county, though, are in a budget deficit. Some homeless services are actually looking at potentially being cut. So how would you plan to fund this big plan?
So the first day I started working with Chair Vega Peterson, that was really the Monday after the election. It wasn't just January 1st. So we talk about 100 days, but the research and the planning had really been going on for years previous to that. So this is not happenstance. But I immediately started reaching out to city, to county, to metro, to state, and started working with all those individuals right now to fundraise. And they've stepped up. The Metro Council is providing $15 million for that plan, because not only does county have a budget crunch, Portland does as well. So the way we take that pressure off is having our community come together in our time of need. But it's not just Portland trying to help Portland. It's the entire state is stepping up. The legislators, the reps and the senators are all looking at funding. And so that's what we're actively doing right now, is filling in the gaps on that 28 to not put the pressure on the city council. Because we've got an awful big hole we have to dig out of. But it's been good. Everybody's stepping up from a funding standpoint. The conversations are ongoing.
And a big part of this plan is providing more overnight shelter beds, correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay, so one of the things is the congregate shelters, or the overnight shelters, have been unpopular among homeless people. We've heard from them on that. They say they feel unsafe, or there's a lack of security for them. Some have told us they have their belongings stolen when they go to the bathroom. So why not focus more on long-term housing, or more of a private setting where people don't have to leave every morning, and wonder where they're going to be again that night?
Yeah, you're right. And it is not a single resource. We need housing too. We just had a meeting with our multifamily task force today about we need to build housing faster. So the governor and I convened a task force. What can we do to get out of the way to let developers develop? And so that's what we're doing. But we have to recognize that asking people to wait in a tent for 5 years while we build housing, while that suffering and the dying and the agony goes on, we as a community cannot normalize that. So we have to act now and address that all of the continuum parts are fully addressed. We don't want people in congregate shelters. We want to move them through a seamless continuum of care to eventually get them housing. But in the interim, we do not want people suffering on the street.
How do you get people, though, to want to go into those shelters when they say they'd rather stay in a tent because they don't have people around them, or maybe they feel unsafe? Is there security or new things that you're looking at?
Yeah, it's great that you asked that. But let's be clear. A tent is just fostering suffering on our street. There is nothing good that happens when somebody's in a tent. There is no good way that person can get up and go to their job the next day, day after day after. What we need to do is connect them with day centers and services. There are individuals that may not want to come in, and we respect that, but we have to enforce our no camping codes, which means there's no tents or makeshift shelters or RVs on the street. We have to recognize that businesses must be able to survive and thrive, and we need to provide those resources so residents can survive and thrive at the same time. But when somebody's ready to come in, we need to be ready too. And right now we don't have enough resources. So when somebody wants to come in for recovery or mental health services, we can't ask them to wait 4 weeks or 6 weeks for a bed. We must have that ready for them right then. And so that's what we're providing.
Let's talk about something that happened new this year. Portland opened its first women-only shelter. That was in January, right? It partnered with the Salvation Army, the city did. It was a temporary shelter. It was open for 90 days. And so that would mean it just wrapped up. So can you give us a look at how that went and what's next for that? Yeah,
so it's extended through April 30th. And we're working on long-term funding to keep it open. Ongoing. You know what's exciting about that location in particular is that they've got an extra floor that's going to help with recovery services, and then they have about 30 empty apartments on the 3rd floor. So we're looking at activating that. So it's not just shelter, nighttime shelter. We will activate anything we can get our hands onto that's life-saving, which includes 24-hour shelters like Bybee Lakes, which is we're funding, or apartments, which is what we're looking at activating through the Salvation Army. So it's a real comprehensive approach. Just act and act now and act fast.
And those apartments upstairs, those would be for more long-term housing? Is that the plan?
Yeah, to transition people into that long-term housing. So it's a transitional housing or apartment to just get them ready for work, workforce development, for recovery, and then the goal is always housing.
Our team spoke with a former outreach worker who worked at that women's shelter that was run through the Salvation Army. She told us she quit because there weren't enough resources or training really for staff to deal with the level of crisis that people are in. Do you worry that in the spirit of trying to act quickly, there isn't always the adequate planning that is set up for this sort of situation?
Yeah, you know, I spoke to the manager at the location and he assured me that all was well, that they're making the changes necessary, that they're really centering the care. And then I went and I visited and I talked to the guests. And one guest came up to me and just said, "Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you for this. I was housed 6 months ago and I'm not," she said she voted for me, but she was grateful for the life-saving care. So are there going to be detractors? Yes. But in the end, we have to focus on the greatest effort right now to provide the greatest support for those that are suffering.
Have there been other examples of maybe moving too quickly or maybe in a way that you didn't understand that is giving you now perspective that you think, oh, we could do this a little different?
You bet. We had 100-person shelter, and there was one neighbor who was affected, and so we improved our outreach, created an engagement zone, and now we're creating ways to really help. Like if a tent comes in that engagement zone, we're actively going to address that individual and say, hey, we got a shelter, come in, but we can't have you camping in this area. So we're really listening to our neighbors clearly and creating systems that really help nurture that relationship around the shelter. So yes.
And a big question ongoing when it comes to homelessness is, even with resources and beds available, we touched on this a little, but how do you get the people to go to those resources, when they don't want to? That's a big question. Yeah. I know we do have the camping ban, as you mentioned, the city passed last year. As of January, fewer than 10 people were actually cited or jailed for not moving. How is that going now?
A lot of questions there. So as far as the service resistant process, here's what I do know is that 30 or 40% of the people on the street want shelter. So let's at least address that, right? Wouldn't anybody love to know that we have 5,000 people on the street and we're able to care for 2,000 of them just immediately? So let's take care of that right now. As far as I think the laws that you had said, what was the other question?
In January, 10 people. It was fewer than 10. I think it was 8 or 9 people. Do you know if there's more people?
I appreciate you bringing that. We cannot arrest our way out of unsheltered homelessness. So I've really kind of pulled back the officers from doing that, because all you're guaranteeing when you arrest somebody and or cite them or take them into jail is you're ensuring that person's going to be homeless for another day. So let's set up the shelters and provide that shelter right now for those individuals.
So you've asked police not to cite or take them to jail if they're not going to move?
I have clearly focused my conversations with Chief Day. It's not something I'm supporting, arresting people. Let's set up shelter, because we can start really helping those that want shelter into shelter. But we are continue to do camp removals, but we know camp removals isn't a solution. It's just basically a Band-Aid. We need shelter. We need to provide resources. We need to provide connections with loved ones that are, outside of our city or even inside our city.
What about people who are severely mentally ill or addicted to drugs that may not be aware of how to keep themselves safe or sheltered? How do you reach them? Do you think there's a mandatory move that should be happening there?
Well, outreach workers, you've got to build trust with those individuals. And so, at the Portland, we have 5 outreach workers. And so the budget that I'm formulating is going to take that 5 to 15, because we have to create relationships with those individuals and then connect them with the care they need, which could be a family member, which could be behavioral health services at a shelter or a connection, but we got to keep reaching out to those individuals. Portland Street Response, I just expanded the services there so they can have more services to provide for those people in need, instead of just a bottle of water or a granola bar or something like that, and then driving away. Now we can connect somebody with shuttle to a resource. Super important.
There's so much to talk about when it comes to our homeless crisis, but we're going to move on now to some other topics. So we recently saw that the Portland Metro Chamber released their annual State of the Economy. An economist warned that Portland is headed towards an urban doom loop. I'm sure you're familiar with this and heard all about it. What were your thoughts when you heard that?
Well, we have to take what we have to take with what we have right now seriously. I don't want to say that no, we're not, because let's take that seriously. But I've been very clear with everybody. It is time for us to focus on a boom loop, which means that we start focusing on the new James Beard public market that's coming. And Mike Bennett, who is an artist who just opened a store on Broadway that's going to bring young people into an aquarium type animated place right on Broadway. That's going to be next to Pioneer Courthouse Square. It's activating Portland, and it's also dreaming big again. It's like, I'm going to make a play and be a cheerleader for Portland for Major League Baseball. We have to focus on our other areas, like in District 1, which is East Portland. We have a new tax increment financing funding to rebuild, to repurpose, to restore that community, to improve streets and infrastructure so we can bring businesses and community members out of their house and back onto the street and rebuild those communities. We're not going to let this doom loop thinking stop what we're doing. This is our city's renaissance. I see green shoots. I know that there's some difficult stories this year. But that mentality, that's the years past. I'm not inheriting that. I'm inheriting the new Portland, which is really going to address on bringing our communities out of the house and back onto the streets and caring for our neighbors and neighborhoods.
Downtown Portland has seen an increase in foot traffic, it seems. Is there anything you're doing to get some of those vacant office buildings rented or leased? Yeah,
it is a huge opportunity. Office and residential is important. We've got 2 projects that we're working on right now to get some conversions. I had a CEO of a large employer downtown come into my office yesterday and said, we're bringing our staff back to work. We're going to be making that announcement in the weeks ahead. And I just said, great, I'll focus on the cleanliness. I'll focus on the safety. I'll focus on restoring what Portland's promise has always been, and Portland's starting to step up and really start to recognize that downtown core is an extraordinary opportunity. What are we doing to activate it? The governor has really gone all in with helping us work with different individuals. Like we've got an announcement on some tax abatement we're going to work on to help developers develop and really bring people back into that core by bringing housing to the forefront.
Nice. Well, let's talk about budget. The city's budget, it has close to a $100 million deficit right now. The city administrator did propose cuts across the board, including parks, programs, a community center, but spared public safety. There's still a huge gap, though, even with his recommendations that cuts would need to be made to balance the budget. So your budget will be released in May, but can you give us an idea of what you're planning as far as what the city administrator recommended?
Yeah, you know, every meeting we have, I've been meeting with the counselors at least once every 2 weeks personally. For really the last 4 or 5 months, even before I took office, because I want to understand what are your values. And so we've been sharing and swapping ideas, and I've been taking those into consideration on the budget. We did 4 listening sessions, which KGW showed up and was taping, was really able to listen to the community members. The parks are incredibly important, and so while there were some cut opportunities that the city administrator offered, I pulled some of those off and our funding and all put forward to the council. But we have $100 million, but I'm happy to say that we've had external funding that we're gaining to lower that. We've made some strategic cuts. Unfortunately, we're going to be less staff at the end of the day, which is unfortunate. We're really being cautious on who and what departments we're funding. We're looking at streamlined services. We're spending this weekend in a long weekend to finalize the budget, but we're going to get there. We're going to provide a balanced budget that focuses on our values, that restores the cleanliness and safety to Portland.
So are you saying park systems are now seem to be spared?
There are certain parks in the system. Here's what we looked at. When you cut programs that have large volunteer services, when you are stepping over $5 to get to $1, in other words, when you have hundreds, if not thousands of volunteers that are stepping up to cut $1, and when those volunteers go away, you're cutting the community's action in helping that community. We really strategically looked at those programs of adding those back.
Okay.
So while park maintenance might see a reduction, really started focusing on the programs that keep the kiddos active, keep the families engaged, and bring the vibrancy of the park really so it flourishes, so it's our community together.
Another, we heard a lot of outspoken viewers was the community centers, specifically St. John's, Monavilla, Peninsula Park centers. How do those stand now?
Really working hard to keep them funded.
Okay.
But no promises, but you'll see it at the beginning of May when I introduce my budget. But I got a great team that's working really hard to keep those core services functioning well.
As we mentioned, 2/3 of the budget goes to public safety. Is there a way to make that more efficient? Are you looking at any cuts in that area?
Not looking at cuts in that area. So I really walked into office with 3 key tenets. We are going to end unsheltered homelessness and the suffering. We're going to reduce the burden on public safety. A response time for a police officer at 24 minutes or 22 minutes when 10 years ago it was 6 minutes. We've got to make sure that people are confident that somebody's rested and ready and well-resourced to show up to make the right decision when they do. I'm not looking at cuts at public safety, but we have been looking at different scenarios, but I don't want to make any promises today.
Okay, we'll wait and see. Thank you so much. Coming up, we will continue our conversation with Mayor Wilson, including how federal workforce and spending cuts have had an impact in Portland and how Portland's climate goals are coming along to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We are continuing our conversation with Portland's new mayor, Keith Wilson. Mayor Wilson, thanks for being with us today. There's a lot to talk about, so
yes, it is. 30 minutes is nearly enough.
Goes by fast. Let's jump right back into it. Okay, speaking of, we were talking about downsizing cuts on the city level that may have to happen. Let's talk about what we're seeing at the national level right now. President Trump is looking for ways to cut the federal workforce, reduce spending. Have you seen any of these federal funding cuts impact Portlanders?
Not yet, but we are tracking it through grants. You know, we have public safety grants, we certainly have transportation grants and housing grants. It is alarming. We're tracking it, we're hopeful, but we're also being very clear. We have to be ready for what may come. But the chaos is certainly frustrating when you're trying to turn a city around. We wish it weren't the case.
If you're making the budget right now and you're planning ahead, I mean, is there any uncertainty as far as federal dollars you're not sure to plan for?
No, we have to act with what we have today. We can't pull back funding in the middle of a crisis. And when you have a budget deficit, you've got to address that crisis right now. So we have a humanitarian crisis and we're going all in, and my council colleagues are going all in. We can't focus on what's going to happen tomorrow. Let's address what we can control today.
What specific areas could be at risk that underfunding if they're cut?
Well, the two largest, transportation.
Okay.
We have a lot of projects in Portland that are either on the planning, being obligated, or we're getting ready to break ground right now. But that goes with state and federal as well. You know, you got the Rose Quarter project, you got the Interstate Bridge Replacement project. There's a lot in peril. And then housing. You know, we receive a lot of grants. Community development block grants are very flexible that all communities around the nation, whether you're red or blue, you depend on. And they're giving us guidance that it's uncertain or unsure. So we're going to spend what we have right now and then not borrow trouble. If and or when it does, then we'll make those modifications to move our city forward.
So plan as you would in the past for getting that same funding.
Have to. We haven't seen it yet, but it's just absolute chaos.
Well, let's talk about one of your goals to make Portland a greener city. That's a big goal for you as well. You even hope that it becomes the city with the lowest carbon footprint in the nation. We know many federal grants related to climate have been paused, even canceled. Do you see this having an impact on the city? Yeah,
you bet. You know, I owned and operated a business that had a green fleet. You had talked about electric trucks. We had decarbonized our Oregon operations, and I'm really excited to be the mayor of Portland because I get to take that lessons learned and now scale it. And Vivian Satterfield is our new Chief Sustainability Officer. We now have a Sustainability Commission, and we have the Portland Clean Energy Fund. We are the envy of the nation on how we fund and value decarbonization. So while we're losing those grants, electrification grants, we still have a funding source to turn Portland into the greenest, cleanest city in the United States. And I'm looking forward to the lessons learned and acting them in Portland. And I expect in the coming years, we will be the greenest city with the lowest carbon in the nation.
Any steps you've taken in the last 100 days to try to go after that goal?
You know, right now we're really focusing on the crisis, and I've really set everybody up. We have a one-year goal. Let's stay focused on that crisis. That's our vision. But behind the scenes, Vivian is working extremely hard to get everything in motion, put our commission together. But our council is really excited about putting clear goals on the Portland Clean Energy Fund. So the 13 of us are going to work as a close-knit team with the goals of delivering decarbonization and mitigating climate change in Portland for Portlanders to set the example for others.
We only have about a minute left, but I want to ask you, this was your first role in public office, right? A big one to step into at a critical time in Portland. So has anything been different than you expected, and has your perspective changed on anything since coming into office?
Yeah, you know, a lot of nerves. So, I mean, day to day, it's from a tangerine in the stomach versus a tangelo or an orange or a grapefruit. It's up and down. The stress is still there, whether you work in private or public. But I will tell you, the skills of chief executive that I've learned in running a high-performing, innovative business have transferred so very, very well. These are good people that want to do great work, that are just looking for a vision and looking for that senior leadership. But everything we need is here. The resources that we have can deliver the renaissance that we all want. So I've been really excited about that. I kept Michael Jordan, our current city administrator, longer because he's got that institutional knowledge. That's my weakness. I have chief executive experience. The two of us together have really been able to steer a vision and a path for Portland and I'm excited about what we're going to accomplish this year.
A lot of work ahead, but we
lot of work.
appreciate you coming in for your first 100 days. Congratulations on
Yeah,
the new
thank you,
position.
Stephanie. I appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. And thanks so much for watching. Next week on Straight Talk, we tackle one of the most controversial topics of the last year, artificial intelligence. We'll discuss what it is, how it's being used, its future role in our society, and some of the major ethical questions the technology raises. A reminder, you can stream Straight Talk on your own schedule anytime. You can download the free KGW Plus app, available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on Straight Talk.